Great. Hi, everyone. This is Kim Hallen. I'm the host of the Horse Wisdom Virtual Book Club. And tonight is, I'm not even sure what day it is. It is June 26th. I can't believe it. June 26th. And tonight we're going to be using lesson 15, which is nature is the source of sanity, as the topic of conversation. And it's kind of funny, to some degree at this point. Oh, hi, Anna. I just had to say hi. Those of you can't see, but her one of her sons was on waving at us. So anyway, at this point in like having gone through the book, it almost seems like, duh, nature is the source of sanity, right? I feel like we talk about this so much. And then I'm reminded, not just every day when I go outside, but when I do the sessions I've been doing, it's really striking how often people either are not spending time in nature at all, or are spending time in nature but aren't really present with nature when they're out in nature. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And that's certainly how I used to be for a lot of my life. And then others who are, in nature but completely distracted, either talking or in their mind, right? And again, not really, maybe or not only not present with nature, but also there's another step of like learning from nature, right? Which is actually, is there wisdom there that we can gather in addition to just finding calmness there? So there's lots of layers to it, and it seems kind of simple, but it's not happening for a lot of people at all. And so I guess I just want to start out, let you guys introduce yourselves, those of you that are here, and maybe just, I don't know, either say if nature is a source of sanity for you, or maybe just one or two brief opening remarks about why you wanted to be here tonight for this discussion. So Jerry Ann, let's go ahead and start with you.
Well, I'm Jerry Ann. I'm very attached to nature. I've now been living on our little 5-acre sort of, we're not in the country. We're not that far out of a small town. I hear traffic noises and things. I hear way more noises than I thought I was going to hear. But after having spent 5 years here, I have a hard time being in anything that's more confined. And so I guess I'm one of those people who's very sensitive to the space around me and the noises around me, and really feel most comfortable when I can hear true nature sounds, animal sounds, wind sounds, the weather, all of it.
Yeah, I definitely want to come back and talk more about that, because there is something, definitely something to the sounds of nature, right? For sure.
And can I say one more thing, Kim?
Yeah.
That is that in this last year, I would say I have really learned about, quote, being connected to the earth more so through my actual physical body than I had understood in the past, in a conscious way, more like, truly conscious way.
Yeah, I can relate to that. That same is true for me. So I look forward to getting into a little more about that too. Thank you, Jerry Ann.
Yeah.
Barbara.
I'm Barbara. I definitely feel connected. It's a growing thing. It's a changing thing, but it's interesting. It occurred to me when you talked about the opposite, that you don't do well when you're not able to get in nature. So my son we're in Eastern Pennsylvania. My son is in Pittsburgh, which is Western Pennsylvania. And when we go to Airbnbs, it's a very interesting city. Like he's not in the city proper. So there is nature around, but I realized with Airbnbs that I got in one where we were on the second floor. And while I could go through the house to get outside, it wasn't easy. Like for me, I'm only on 2 acres here, but I can just step out onto my deck and I'm in nature. and it's fairly private. Not to mention there's a 48-acre farm where I'm so lucky to have my companion Leo. But I was really noticing my mental health was like having issues. And honestly, full disclosure, well, I had a medical issue that made it hard for me to walk around. So I wasn't doing as much walking around. And at some point I realized in subsequent bookings of Airbnb, I'm like, no, I need to be in a place where I can get outside, even if it's only like a 6x6 plot of grass and that, you know, birds have access. I can't be in something that's like an apartment. I can, but it's not good for my mental health. So it was the opposite. And I do appreciate it now, like even now looking out my window and it's going to be a storm and the trees, the leaves are going, but the opposite of it, I realized how much I needed it when I didn't have it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I definitely can relate to that as well. Yeah, thank you, Barbara. Anna.
Yeah, definitely. It's, I think, pretty much always been a part of, oh, I didn't really introduce myself. I'm Anna. I'm in Virginia, and we just live on 5 acres now, but it's kind of out in the country, and I have horses. So nature's always been part of my life. I think even growing up, I was born in the Philippines. So like we did a lot of beach time and a lot of outside time there when I was really young. And then my parents have always kind of been outdoorsy people. Like my mom's not a camping person necessarily, but you know, she does like to be outside. And I definitely appreciate now the sounds of nature. Like, to be honest, birds are not like my favorite noise, particularly early in the morning, because they're loud.
Yes.
However, now that I have children, I have a new appreciation for the sounds of nature, because the sounds of yelling children, yeah,
Birds
that's a
are
whole
better than that.
ballgame. Yes, birds are better than that. Or like the pitter patter of little feet at, you know, whatever ridiculous time of the morning it is. Yeah. So it's funny. It's funny that I think even when my kid, they're only 18 months apart, so their like little bitty baby time was kind of close together. And even though I think while I was getting out, I was doing horse stuff still and, you know, trying to be outside, I definitely don't feel like I was as present as I was normally. And this is like something I didn't realize until later. And then I was like, God, what, you know, like there's all these things that I'm, you know, like I just feel. And then I started to realize, I'm like, oh, you're out here, but you're not appreciating being out here, right? You're just, you know, doing, you know, your attention's focused on the kids or, you know, whatever, not being, you know, yeah. So that was an interesting learning experience for me.
Yeah, I went through a similar kind of epiphany too. Yeah. And Kate, will you introduce yourself and maybe just say a couple opening remarks about nature?
Hi, I'm Kate. I am in central North Carolina, and I live on about an acre here. And I have been, I'm sorry, I'm just watching my dog doing something really strange. I've been doing a lot of gardening, like a lot of gardening over the last year. And it's finally, you know, it's like I have, you know, dug up whole sections of my property and tilled and like done all this stuff. And it's been a ton of work. And it's finally all like growing and blooming. And it's, I don't know, I've been doing this for a while, you know, it's like I've been living here for 8 years and I've had, you know, it's like every year I've planted some, but this year has definitely been the most. And I'm always surprised when things live. I'm always surprised when things grow and they bloom. I mean, it's like magic to me. And I have a very, 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 very lively population of birds that live on my property, and snakes and all kinds, chipmunks, all kinds of things. And I have my dogs. And so I don't know. I'm finding that like one of the most enjoyable times of my day is I literally walk around and I look at all of my plants and I talk to them and I tell them like how great they're doing. And I talk to all the pollinators who are all over them and tell them how great they're doing. And it's just so freaking cool to watch everything sort of evolve and like kind of communicate with each other and just do unexpected things. So, not that nature is only my land, but like I do spend a lot of time here, and just it's a little difficult right now because like literally next door to me they have just clear cut acres of land, and like my house is shaking because they are working with so much heavy machinery during the day, and it's I'm trying not to let it sort of disturb that part of the enjoyment of my existence. But yeah, I mean, it definitely is one of the most grounding things that I do, one of the most kind of one of the things that I enjoy most about my days. So yeah.
Oh, well, and yeah, this is all about like our connection to nature, right?
Yeah.
So your yard is absolutely nature, right?
Yeah,
It's not
definitely is now. Yeah.
not the totality of nature, but it is where you're finding a big part of your connection with nature right now. Yeah. And back to kind of what Anna said, it's really kind of fascinating to think about. Well, earlier I was thinking about how as a younger adult, I spent a lot of time in nature, but it was usually like doing something, or if I was outside with the horses, I was doing chores or trying, training horses. That's what I was focused on. Or when I used to go on hikes, it was always about exercise, and I was either power walking or running, or even sometimes with earbuds in, or talking to a friend. And I remember when I first started dating Chris, which was almost 10 years ago now. And this was kind of when some of the big shift was happening for me. And he's a bird watcher. And so I remember we like went out I wasn't really much of a bird watcher at the time, but went out into the woods with him. And, he walked so slow and he was listening, right? Because he would want to hear where the birds were. And this was just such a different experience than I had always kind of done hiking and walking in the woods as exercise. And it was just a really big shift. And I found that it was actually kind of hard for me at first. I'd just start thinking about things or problem solving or whatever. And then he'd notice a bird and I'd try to be like listening again. And so it actually took some effort to be present with what I was hearing and what I was seeing, and to slow down. Right. And then what really helped me was taking my camera with me and noticing things and wanting to capture pictures. And that was a way that helped me kind of learn how to be in nature again, which is a weird thing to say as someone who spent a lot of time outside for a lot of my life. But I was trying to think back as a kid. I was fascinated with, I think I was pretty present when I was outside with nature then, because I was exploring all the animals, and we did all kinds of crazy things. But I think I was much more in nature and with nature as a kid, but then lost that somewhere along the way. So I'd love to hear about, any of you in that regard. Do you think you were really connected as a child? And did you kind of have to, or are you in the process of relearning how to be in nature, like truly be with what's happening in nature? Whoever wants to pop in.
So I grew up in like a very rural part of Kansas. And my brother and I just spent, when we were latchkey kids, like that was a thing in the 70s, and like, so we were just out in the woods all the time. And always like digging around for toads and just, anything that we could find, bugs, everything was interesting. And, I don't have a lot of positive memories, honestly, about my parents, but I do remember just going for walks. Like I would go for walks with my mom in the woods. And I remember she liked to collect like bittersweet, because she would make, it's sort of a vine that makes these orange berries, because she would like decorate with that. And she would hunt for like morels, and I hated mushrooms, but I just like doing that with her. It was just, we were just kind of there and doing that. And like it's very easy for me to drop into nature. Like I've been a scuba diver for over 25 years, and like like being underwater for me is like when I'm comfortable, when I'm in a good place underwater, like I almost feel more comfortable there than I do on land. Like it just in real life, because I just feel like I just kind of blend into the scenery and I don't need to do anything. I'm just there and I'm just an observer, and I'm just so stunned and like so appreciative and grateful and privileged to be allowed to be down there with them, you know.
Yeah.
Like it's just like going to church for me. Like that's the only way I can describe it. So yeah, it's like I can drop into that that feeling very easily. It's just like everything for me, especially now. It's just sort of like the initiation of going outside. It really is just like going outside at all. It's like once I'm there, I'm good. It's just like sometimes it's hard for me to actually like leave the house.
Yeah, make that transition, right?
Yeah, transitions are really, that's a good way to put it. Transitions are very difficult. So yeah, anyway, so
Hmm. Well, I'm curious, is it equally hard to make the transition back to inside? So is it like
oh yeah.
inertia? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's actually what I was doing before I came in here. And I'm sorry I was a few minutes late. There's a thunderstorm coming and I realized I had some equipment out and I needed to get it in. But yeah, it's like once I'm out there, I just sort of lose time. And yeah, it's like, I don't know. Yeah, every transition is difficult for me now. I think I haven't met you. Maybe I'm sorry, the person in the upper right corner.
Jerry Ann.
It only says G, and I don't, or G.
Yeah, Jerry Ann.
Jerry Ann. Hi, nice to meet you. So I'm recovering from a brain injury, and so like yeah, transitioning from one thing to another, just in general, is very difficult. Even if it's transitioning to something I really want to do. But yeah, it's just yeah, I love being out there. It's hard to tear myself away, and like I got a new volunteer gig at a farm that's only 10 minutes away from me, and I have worked very hard to try to find this, and it is beautiful out there. It is beautiful. It's a residential children's school, and I didn't even know they had animals there. It's like I've been there to their farm stand. But yeah, it's small. They have like 3 goats and they have a donkey and they have 2 horses, and I'm like, done, you know?
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And it's you know,
Awesome.
like they're like I can go anytime I want, and yeah, it's just gorgeous. So I'm like super psyched to spend some time out there, and they have trails, like hiking trails, and yeah.
Lovely. Lovely.
Yeah.
All right. So Jerry Ann or Anna, either of you want to talk about kind of childhood to adulthood differences?
The first thing that occurred to me, I had my paternal grandparents had property in northern Idaho and had I was, as my mom says, you were a gleam in your father's eye. You know, you've been there since you were small, you know. And my grandfather was very much of a naturalist and very quiet and subdued, but he used to, when I got old enough, he would take me on his trail bike and take me up in the mountains places and then park the bike and then hike in somewhere. And so I got one-on-one time with a very quiet, stoic man who followed trails and, you know, did stuff like that. And I was a city girl. I'd grown up in the city. So that kind of time was really important. And my grandmother, his wife, was the kind of person that every night or in the evening, you know, after dinner or whatever, you would take a walk. And you would walk on the property to a certain bridge and sit over a creek quietly. And it was kind of like a meditative thing, like you just kind of sat there. And I didn't realize till I was a lot older that they gave me an opportunity, a window into just being in nature by being that way. And my own parents, my dad wasn't particularly nature oriented at all. My mom wasn't somebody who wanted any hardship out camping or anything. She loved animals, but not, you know, and maybe some gardening, but not to go out and be outside in the big the big nature.
Natural
But-
world. Yeah.
What's that?
The natural world, right?
Yeah. But as a child, as a very, very young child, where my parents had their first house together, it was very close to a blueberry. Well, it was a blueberry farm. It was agricultural land, but it was like we were like in a development on the side of that. And back in those days, you could just run down the street and go on to the creek or go somewhere and catch frogs or do stuff, and nobody cared. Nobody worried about you. You could just run off. And so I have very
Definitely.
distinct memories of just being gone. Just taking off and going down the street by myself. A lot of times by myself.
Yes.
Or maybe one other kid or whatever, So they let us wander, back then. And I think that was important. And so anyways, those are kind of where I think it comes from in my background or in my exposure. But my grandparents were very influential in the time I got to spend with them. And my grandfather would quote, "Take me out." We packed a lunch and we were gone the whole day. And we didn't talk a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
Anna, you want to let your buddy say hi?
Hi.
Hi there.
Yeah,
Oh,
one.
hello. What are your names?
Hi, Maverick.
Maverick,
Maverick and Levi.
Levi.
No, Joey.
Your other birds, right?
Okay. Mhm.
And they're lucky.
I think, yeah,
they
like
grow
Jerry
outside, don't they?
like Jerry Ann said, like we were kind of, banned from the house, right? Like it was like, don't come inside. And I mean, I lived from probably, I think from the time I was like 8, until I was a little younger than that, actually. But until I was 11, we lived, that I have really good memory of. We lived in a subdivision. And before that, I think we lived mostly in military housing, so that's not very nature-ish. But back then, there were, it was next to nature or by something that you could, a pond or a creek or a trail or strawberry fields or whatever. And so we just went and did. And even, the subdivision that I lived in was out right outside a Naval Air Station, so we had jet noise all the time, but we were out, in the fields. So, so it was, yeah. And I think just now, I'm just more conscious of it than I was when I was a kid. Like, I don't think I didn't really appreciate it like I do now. So yeah, I think that's the difference.
Well, it does seem like a lot of us, and your boys obviously growing up on a farm are outside a lot, but I think probably all of us of our generations did spend more time outside. That's kind of an interesting thought to think about. There's a lot of kids today who maybe don't as much. But yeah, for both of you, was there then a period of your life where you feel like you weren't as connected with nature and then now you're getting back to it? Or do you feel like it's stayed with you?
Gosh, I guess when I was working and going to school and going to college, maybe you took a vacation to be, or visited the grandparents or something like that, but not particularly a lot of huge outdoor time. I'm fortunate though, because I grew up in Seattle and there was and I didn't grow up in an apartment. I grew up in a house, and most of the time there's been nature or we weren't just boxed in. And it's not like we had property, but we had a big backyard or something, you know? So there was stuff around, but I mean, what occurs to me is I think a lot about people who haven't been able to be exposed to nature at all in their daily life, like it's just the city all the time. I can't understand, or I can almost feel in my body like super uncomfortable when I think about somebody who has to live in an apartment building and go up 10 floors and then go down a hallway to get to their apartment, and they can't necessarily really open their windows or whatever. That kind of energetically makes me panicky.
Mm.
And so I don't know, I'm just saying it just I wonder if you've never been around it, if you don't know what you're missing, or if you've been around it and it's natural to, you know, be around it. You know,
Well, I
like
think part of it
what-
too is we are humans are one of the most adaptable, you know, species. And I know I've gone through periods in my life where, you know, living in a dorm in college, or
I hated
live in
that.
I did live in an apartment complex, you know, at one time on a second floor, only for a year. And you just kind of, I guess, adapt to what that day to day is. But I honestly do think it probably did take a toll on me, right? And now that I use
Yeah.
nature like very intentionally, I don't think I would ever choose to go back to that. Thankfully, I have that choice. But yeah. And well, so just real quick, Barbara had an issue with some kind of health. Her mom's dealing with a lot of health stuff right now, and something happened. So I think it's okay, but she just needed to go deal with something. So that's why she hopped off. But she messaged me to let me know. But you know, I have talked with clients here who, you know, come out here and spend 3 hours being present, like really present with nature, and are just like, wow, like they're like, I exercise in nature, or maybe I go outside and smoke, right? But I go outside to solve my problems. And so then they're just in their minds thinking all the time. But if we're busy in our minds, we're not actually present with our senses. We're not listening, we're not feeling, we're not noticing, we're not seeing. So that is a very different experience. And our nervous system, although I think it helps, you know, they all say I feel better when I'm outside, because at least we're not with some of the other stimulation that's so frenetic. But if our minds are still spinning and we're not really present, then we're probably not getting the full benefit of it. But I even know people who just like Jerry-Ann, you said, just maybe looking out their window, if that's the only access they have
Yeah.
to. And I think about nursing homes and
Oh.
out of those places, right, where sometimes out the window or sitting in front of a window or on a little porch, and how important that is for them to be able to still feel that connection in some way. Yeah. But I'd love to hear a little more about, for each of you, what at this stage of your life, what brings you a sense of sanity in nature? What is it about nature that makes you, helps you, I don't know, helps your nervous system, helps your brain, helps you feel calmer? If it does. Is there anything specific?
I mean, I think for me, like when I'm doing things outside, I'm generally doing physical things. So I'm planting, I'm weeding, I'm digging, I'm hiking. I'm, you know, when I was diving, which hasn't been for a couple of years now, I was diving. So like, I think one of the things that helps my mental health about being outside is like, it really gets me into my body and out of my head. And like, you know, over the last year, I've been really fortunate to have the time and the opportunity to do I do a lot of yoga and I'm studying martial arts. And that also has, especially like the Muay Thai, the kickboxing has gotten me really into my body, like in a way that I never was before. So like, and it's kind of hard to describe, you know, it's not like I would ever go around like knocking heads with horses or anything, but there is something about feeling, I think I feel more competent in my body. I feel like I can handle myself better in an emergency than I could before. And I think that other animals notice that. It's like, it's just that reflects as part of your being, that you are really in your body, and your body is competent to do things it needs to do. So, yeah, like I really have felt very different since I started doing the Muay Thai. And I feel like that somehow has like put a piece of the puzzle in that wasn't there before, in my ability to sort of really be like, I don't know exactly how to put it, really how to be an animal in nature, really to feel my body as an animal in nature.
I'm really glad you brought that up, actually, because I've been thinking a lot lately about like the meaning of life, of being alive in a body. And if you look at the natural world, their job is to master their bodies.
Yeah.
Right. It can take a lifetime to master being able to do all the things you need to do to survive or enjoy yourself or live. But it is all about expressing and accomplishing, yes, using your body. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really innate natural thing that we get really good at using our thumbs, right? We're really good at using parts of our body.
Right.
But we almost have to go a little out of our way in today's domestic world to really feel at home in our bodies. And like you said, be in tune with those more primal aspects of it. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, there is something about literally fighting other people, like practicing fighting with other people, that just like puts you in it, you know. It's, you don't have any choice but to really be in your body and in your nervous system. So yeah, it's been it's been really interesting. Yeah,
very neat.
Can I just say something? That is so fascinating to me, Kate, because I've been reading the work from Peter Levine on trauma release.
yeah,
And he, like, the information is so incredible about the different parts of your nervous system and that we're actually designed to be able to regulate through things that are life-threatening, because we're an animal. Like when you said that, you know, and I'm like, oh, you know, there's sort of this broader thing where we get stuck on, you know, trauma. But on the other hand, we have this nervous system that is actually designed to rescue us and take care of us and whatever. But in our way of living in the domestic life, we don't often get to have that heightened experience, say, of fighting someone, activating the nervous system, and then re-regulating and coming back through it on the other side and be okay. Like you're in a safe situation where you get activated, and I'm assuming, right, it's a planned fight or whatever.
yeah.
And then you get a chance to get really in your body because your neural pathways got activated the way they were designed to be. And I'm like, wow, that is really, that just like opens up a whole Pandora's box of questions for me about what it means to get to be in your body to that, you know, in that situation. I mean, that's really interesting.
That's super. I have to say, like, I have had like several of Peter Levine's books on my Kindle forever, and I haven't actually read them. But that's such an amazing point. And that's exactly what happens, actually. Like, it really, it activates that sort of like emergency. And I have had a couple of situations where, you know, it's like, I know I'm sparring with somebody. I know it's not a real fight, but there is just the way somebody smells. Like there was like one instance in particular that just, it was like I had a flashback, like in the middle of working with him. And but it's like, you know, you have this experience. It's like you do literally your 10 rounds and it's over, and you're like, okay, I learned stuff. Like I learned how to use my body in a different way today. I survived and I'm good. And like, I mean, to your point, it's like, I think our ancestors, all of us, or most of us at least, probably, I'm sorry, my dogs always get like really active during these. They sleep like 29 hours a day usually, but they're just always really excited during these calls. It's what it is. But I think like the vast majority of our ancestors probably grew up in places where they were prey, like we were all prey at one time, and we've killed most of the things that want to kill us. But there are a lot of people in the world who still live in places. It's like, I've spent time in Tanzania, and there's a billion ways to get killed by an animal in Tanzania, man, any day of the week. It's a different, it's just a very different existence, and I think a very different like mindset when there's it's like you go down to get your water in the morning and you can get chomped by a freaking hippo. It happens all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, that doesn't happen to us here really.
Or they don't have all the safeties we have with Mother Nature, I mean, animals, anything in nature can take us out, right? Can you survive the winter? Might be even, in the past was an unknown.
Yeah.
Those are both really, really great points. And it does, back to that idea of balance, even balance within our body means that we should be hitting various extremes back and forth, right? Like balance isn't about staying in the center. Balance is like, oh, you go over here, then you come back to here, and you learn how to move through those systems. And we're not necessarily getting a lot of that. That's very interesting. Whereas most wild animals probably go through that several times a day, at least.
Yeah.
Right?
Or with horses, they go through like the drill, at least, even if it's not an actual life-threatening situation. They're like, it could be, and I need to investigate it and decide, and react.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anna, what about you? Yeah.
That just what I mean, that discussion, what Jerry Ann said, really, like, that's one just brought into my mind is one of my pet peeves about what's the right word, either stress management or dealing with trauma in public safety, because for such a long time, and they're kind of going away from this because I think they realize it doesn't work, but there's a big push for something called critical incident stress management, right? Because the thing is, it's the critical incidents that cause people to be messed up, right? Like whatever the proper term is there, I'm not sure.
Messed up. That's a good.
Right, to have trauma responses, right? Like, so, seeing, dead children or, mass casualties or, whatever. And I found that is so not true. And I think that's what they're finding out through this process. And my husband has been like, he's not been a fan of it since its inception, right? Because like, that is not the case. Generally, the people that are in public safety are in it for that reason, right? Like they're in it for those situations. So you have those situations, you get that adrenaline, you do your job, you get it done, and it's over, and you've regulated yourself, right? You're able to go, and then you go. What is not regulating is the everyday stupid stuff. Right? Like the dealing with, the lady whose cable is out and she's cursing you, and the people who are calling because the neighbor's dog pooped on their, on their yard, and it's that stuff that's brought into by society that, people feel like is so important now, when it doesn't really mean a hill of beans. And that's what that's where burnout comes from. That's where people's stress. And then if you have a critical incident and then you have something like that, or vice versa, if that critical incident is smushed in there, then, and you're not able to release from it because now you have to have all this dumb stuff. Yeah, I think that does cause problems, but it's like our bodies are designed and our brains are designed to deal with those emergencies, those problems, right? And then, right, but we've kind of, gotten into this cush living where we don't think that's true, but it is.
Right.
And so that leads me, is funny, I just sent Kate this podcast that I listened to with Rupert Isaacson and Jane Pike. It was on her channel, and they were talking, it was really about vitality or whatever, but they were talking about nature, and he was talking about like, oh, maybe I should be more intentional, sometimes, and whatever. And I thought to myself, maybe this is one of the things that the horses are trying to teach us, especially the horses that are in like the competition world, right? Where we're seeing all of these stress disorders. Like, they're saying, hey guys, like, you're keeping us basically like you keep yourselves, right? Because we think like we've made all these, they have fluffy stalls and it's clean and they have blankets and they have all these things to make them comfortable,
Right.
but now they have all these stress issues. Who does that sound like?
It sounds like us, and we're getting ourselves worked up. Like, it's one thing to have a survival level stress thing, right? That it's like, okay, yes, let's do this. We, our body's like all in, right? And then, like you said, then when we know we're safe, right? Or the crisis is over, it doesn't always mean it ends well, but at any rate, it's one way or another, the crisis eventually is over. And we re-regulate. But you're right, we're at these like, and it's because we're stressing in the horses too. They don't care about that jump. They don't care about that jump circle, that, whatever, that show, whatever it is we're so stressed about and getting them so stressed about. And then you finish it and it's like, well, are we done? Or what is happening? Right. There's no that feeling of right isn't ever really there. Survival level feeling of it. That's really interesting.
And I think the people that are in that world, I've been in that world, like you are more of the type A driven, that not going to slow down, not going to, I'm going to get that prize or that, whatever it is.
Right.
And I listened to another podcast with like a classical, she calls herself, I think she's Australian. She called herself like a classical dressage person, but she's very natural in the way that she does things. And I learned a whole new thing about deerskin and riding with the deerskin. But anyway, it was fascinating. But she was talking, the person interviewing her asked, why do you think that these people that are in this, more this way with their horses don't compete? And she's like, well, just because they're not worried about those things. Right? Like, it's not.
We've let go of that.
Because.
Or never had.
Right. You've let go of that. Yeah. So it was interesting. And I think, maybe people will start to realize that they're, causing these problems with themselves and their horses, but who knows? But it's like, gives me hope that they will notice. But yeah, I feel like nature is meant to, to survive. Like, you have to survival of the fittest. And now in human society, that's not really a thing. So.
Right. But yet we live in this constant level of arousal.
Right.
And so nature can be the source of sanity, right? But at the same time, you're pointing out a really great point, which is when we say that nicely, oh, nature is a source of sanity, we think of it as, the calming aspects of nature, where, nature does have quite stressful situations. But I love how this conversation has brought us around to why that is natural and why it probably helps to create balance within our bodies, and also back to mastering our bodies and knowing what we're capable of. either individually and when we work with others. And there's so much of all that that's probably not being utilized to the full extent when we're not in nature. But it's also what keeps a lot of people out of nature is we don't want to be uncomfortable. We don't want it to be hard, right? We don't want to have to go, gather our dinner or catch our dinner or hunt our dinner and then cook it, right? Like we cook anyway. But anyway, it seems
people
hard for
don't
us.
want to deal with the creepy crawlies. It's like coming back to the like really being in it. And like I really love the sort of the shape of this conversation around like I feel like dealing with crisis is almost like raising your tolerance level for stress.
Yep.
But it has to come back down. Like it has to come back down. It's like you can't stay at that level, which is what most of us do. It's like we stay at like a 6 all the time. But it's like if you can like get to a 9, on a regular basis, like whatever you're doing, like fighting or racing or whatever it is your animal body does, and then regulate back down, like then you're becoming like your nervous system is becoming more competent at regulating itself, I guess. I mean, I'm just thinking about how that works for me.
Mhm.
But like I don't know, I was out in my yard the other day and I flipped over my dog's baby pool and there was a copperhead under it, and I'm like, well shit, like I really didn't want that there because it's right where my dogs like to hang out and whatever. But I didn't freak out, I'm just like, oh well, that's really pretty. I haven't seen one of them, but in real life before, but you can't stay here, buddy. So it's like I dealt with it. And then I found one in my basement a couple of days later, and that was not so great. Didn't catch it. So that's not awesome. But I don't know. It's like dealing with stuff like that. Like I'm not afraid of snakes. I'm not a fan of having a copperhead inside my gate, inside my yard or inside my house. But
Right.
I don't know. It's like whatever, like, 15 minutes before this call, I discovered that there's a yellow jacket colony in my garden. I'm just like, really? It's like, I don't know, you deal with stuff. It's just stuff. But like I lived in Manhattan for a while, and Jerry, and to your point, like it was really hard. It's like I lived exactly that existence that you described. And just it was a lot, man. It was a lot, even though I lived right next to a big park, and that helps, but it was too much for me. But there are people who are just city people, like they just love being in the city. And like if you live in New York City, you have Central Park, which is beautiful and huge and it's nature, and there are pockets. But like I don't know, some people just don't want to be around things that physically challenge them, like snakes, venomous snakes and bees and spiders. And they're just like, it's like the people who joke about getting the flamethrower out when they find a spider in their house, and I'm just like, what are you talking about? But I don't know, I'm like that about mice, so I get it. My thing is mice. Some people are afraid of spiders.
Well, I think getting out of our comfort zones is always hard, and it's different for different people. Like we all are. One thing we're all nature people. We all live in the country. It would be interesting to have a few people on the call who are city people, right? And to find out what part of nature, helps them with sanity. Because my guess is it's just different, maybe a more, I don't know what the word is, curated form of nature. I don't know, right? Less raw. And then there's others who, are extremists, survivalists, who would think, we're living a cushy life, and we are in a lot of ways. But something you said was really interesting, or that's coming out of this conversation. And that, I think it was about that, going to 9 and then coming back to 1. And Barbara and I were actually having a conversation last week about, there's just so much. She's had a bunch of really big things going on in her life. And when that starts to happen, suddenly she's like, I can have boundaries. You get to a point where you just can't take on anymore. And so you're just like, not going to do it, not going to do it, not going to do it. Right. And I think there's something too about the natural world that, it focuses on the important, right. And when they have time, they socialize and do things. But I think it would seem crazy to anybody surviving in nature to get as distracted by stuff, unimportant stuff as we do, right? That would just be like, I ain't got time for that. Are you kidding me? I've got to like get my nest ready or get my, figure out
Yeah.
what we're going to eat today or go get water. So yeah, I mean, we are animals and we are designed for survival. And we're not activating a lot of that, at least not in a healthy way. Yeah. Interesting.
There was I wish I could remember the name of it, but I think it's on Amazon Prime in the documentaries. There's a documentary about a couple that she actually does the story kind of backwards about her early life and her she went out into the Alaska wilderness with her boyfriend of the time, and they go out and they build the cabin. It's one of those stories where, but it follows through her whole life, and she reflects on a lot of that survival mentality of what got them through when they were younger, and later how their lives evolved, and stuff like that. But anyways, it's when you talk about the being out there and having not time for other things, there's just the two of them. And it was interesting how it impacted their relationship, in that they were totally interdependent on each other for their survival. So there wasn't time for certain kinds of fussing, so to speak, or, they really figured out how to, quote, get along or negotiate or whatever, because they really were the other person. So it was interesting, because in nature, they were in nature completely, totally dependent on the nature and the natural world for themselves, and then each other, which the other person I would include as nature.
Right. It kind of puts things in perspective, right? You can't really afford to ruin a relationship on something silly or petty, because you understand that you need each other for survival.
Desperately. Yeah. Like, I mean, it was just like, wow, that the reality, like, you're actually, in a way, your world becomes really small, because you're not relating to a lot of other humans, just this one other human. Anyways, sorry, that's kind of like off track, but it was interesting, because there's like three people in the relationship: nature and the two individuals who are living on point A or B, where they were at. It was
Yeah.
like, whoa.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, and kind of takes us back to, I don't know, one of the conversations early on. I think we talked about there's all different sizes of community and what sort of is an ideal for, humans. Horses have herds and they're big for a reason, but bands are a little bit smaller, and wolves have certain pack sizes. Like there's ranges, but there's, sometimes limits. And I don't know, like human society, like what we even know, we have our family unit, right? Who's in our house with us. But then it's like, how big are cities, or how big are towns, and then the state? Like, I don't know. It's very complicated, versus in nature, there's sort of the immediate community, and you form, I think the sizes of communities are based on survival, right? And based on resources, and based on what's available. I remember reading, about band sizes, as well as whether there was one stallion in a natal band or 2 or 3 stallions sometimes in a natal band, depending on how many predators were around, right? Even animal, like lots of animals are capable of changing their community makeup based on what they need to survive. Survival. Yeah, Kate.
Sorry, that just made me think of, oh God, I can't remember where it was. I think it's somewhere in a very rugged part of Asia. It's not Tibet, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood, I think. So there is a matriarchal culture. Like it's a very rugged, difficult place to live. And so it is a, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not polygamous. It's, so a woman, a mother will have several husbands, and they are generally brothers, and they don't know who the actual biological father of the child or children is or are, because it is such a difficult place to live that they just need to, I think like the survival age is very low, and The survival rate is very low. Anyway, I wish I could remember all the details, but it's just what you were just saying made me think of that, because, it's just like, that is how their culture has evolved in response to the difficulty of the terrain and the environment that they're living in,
And
I
probably
guess the
childbirth.
men made the sacrifice, huh?
And probably childbirth, because the women, there's probably fewer women, because if it was that
Yeah.
remote, you might lose women in childbirth more than you
That's
might
true,
lose
too.
the men. Who know? I don't know.
That's true too. Yeah, I wish I
Letting
could.
in.
I might do a little spelunking just real quick and see if I can find it. But anyway, it's just that the multi-stallion, because I remember from that chapter, that was really interesting, Kim. Yeah.
Yeah, and that thank you for sharing that, because yeah, that way of deciding what community is going to be, or how we're going to form society, and what's acceptable or not, right, is based on survival. And then once we didn't have that anymore, we started creating all kinds of, religious customs, cultural customs, political systems, right, that are, anyway, based on a lot of things that aren't survival necessarily in the purest sense of survival.
It
And I wonder
is.
how stressful that is.
It was actually Tibet, Tibet and Nepal and parts of China, fraternal polyandry, where two or more brothers are married to the same wife, with the wife having equal sexual access to them. It's associated with partible paternity, the cultural belief that a child can have more than one father, believed to be more likely in societies with scarce environmental resources, limit population growth, and enhance child survival. Yeah.
Interesting.
Himalayan mountains. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very.
Yeah.
Well, this is all making me think, gosh, this isn't where I thought tonight's conversation would go, but it's fascinating. But it makes me wonder about, like, even you just said that belief that children can have more than one father. How our beliefs, I don't know where I'm going with that, but like survival in that regard, kind of what they need to do to survive forms their beliefs or their belief systems, right? So I don't know, I'm still formulating this thought in my mind, but that's really kind of interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
When the systems that we live within, right, don't make sense to us at a survival level, or aren't logical in that, like I wonder what that does to our system when everything doesn't feel in alignment. I guess that's where I'm trying to go with that. Whether a belief is true or not, it's in alignment with how they live and what they understand about survival, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not sure a lot of stuff that we believe is in that kind of alignment.
Well, I mean, I think I was saying exactly this last month. So, I mean, I won't go into the whole thing again, but, I think that so like, I live alone. I really don't have family. Like and I am I'm working hard at being less independent, because it's like, I am toxically independent, I would say, and it's not good for me. So I've gotten better at asking for help and reaching out to people when I need it. But I think that like so much of our culture here is informed by toxic capitalism that encourages us to like have everything ourselves, never have to ask anybody else for anything, never have to share anything. It's like this belief that if you are doing well in life, you have all of the things that you could possibly need. And like, that's not how we're designed to live. It's like, if you go to, it's like, I've visited villages in the Amazon and in the mountains in Peru and in Tanzania, and it's like, people have designated roles, and they are, it's like you were saying, Jerry Ann, about that couple who lived in Alaska together. Like, they are interdependent. It's like, I think about like the guy I've been dicking around with for the last 6 months, and like how much energy we've wasted on just like stupid, trauma, anxiety shit. And I'm like, we'd be dead by now if we were in a survival situation. Like, you can't do this push pull thing when you are responsible for each other's survival. Like, most
you won't
people
make it
in the
very
world
long.
are together. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. Like, I think so much of our just like the shit we get twisted up in is informed by this idea we have, like this rugged individualism thing in America, that like, I don't know, everybody else is disposable because we're not supposed to need anybody.
Hmm. Yeah, the whole idea of interdependence changes a whole lot of things. And I think that's, if you've ever watched, I used to watch way back a couple of episodes of Survivor and those sorts of things where, you know, you take domesticated humans and throw them together out there to try to survive. And usually what ends up doing it is they can't get along, right? Or they can't
Right.
agree on things, or they can't, because we don't know how to do that anymore. We don't know how to do that at a survival level, or we wonder if we like it, they like each other or whatever. We have so much room for all this nonsense in our brains, that if we're living at a more of a survival level, there's just really not room for, or maybe there is one day, but then the next 5 days there isn't. So you don't ever really go there, because you're just glad to have the peace and quiet time when you have it.
Yeah.
You more enjoy it than, yeah, this is just really ties right into why nature is sanity, and but not in the way that we often think about it, of just the calmness of it, but actually the design of it, right? Kind of
Yeah.
prevents us from being able to go through a lot of these mental and emotional gymnastics that are pointless,
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
we spend so much time in. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, like I posted this meme on Facebook a few days ago, and I wish I could remember exactly what it said. It was probably like 14 posts again. Oh, away too, so I can't find it easily. But it was something to the effect of like, you know, happiness is great, but we have this idea that we're supposed to be aiming to be happy all the time, and it's bullshit. I mean, I'm really paraphrasing because it was phrased very elegantly, but you know, it was basically like, you know, life is like, it's a series of challenges and difficulties and, you know, like stuff that we have to get through and deal with like moments of happiness and moments of bliss. And you know, it's like, it's not intended that we're supposed to be in that state all the time, and it's not natural for us to be aiming for that as a goal in life. And it made me feel so much better, because I was just like, man,
Yeah.
it's nice to be there, but then you're not in it anymore, and you're like, well, that didn't last very long.
Right. But the other is, what do we go to when we're, you know, fall out of it? Like I go back to Anna and your, you know, the emergency preparation, like the teams that, yes, it's stressful. And yes, those are high stakes situations, but there's something, I've never done it at that level, but when you have a team and you all know what to do, and you like are kind of all on the same wavelength, and you're getting it done, and everybody knows their part, and even if it was a horrible experience, at the end you can be like, man, look at, you know, we did that, like, or right. And there's something really satisfying about that, even if things don't go well. And I think about horse herds and packs, and that's, life isn't always good, but they've got each other's backs, and they are learning about what to do, and they know what to do, and they, you know, there's got to be some level of that maybe help you re-regulate at the end of it, right? To feel like even if we didn't succeed, a lot still went well, right? A lot still went how it was supposed to go, and we were there for each other. And
Yeah.
that I think we don't have as much of. Occasionally in work situations, you have a team situation that goes really well, but those are so structured and hierarchical and weird that I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Different.
You know, as a musician, like I get to experience that. Like that really is one of the only, and maybe that's one of the reasons that I love playing with other people so much, even though it is an enormous pain in the ass most of the time, because people are people. But you know, it's just worth it. It's freaking worth it, all of it, when you do a show, and it just like, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's just like you click in with them, and like you have that experience together. It's like I just did a show with like, I don't know, 20 people last weekend. It was insane, you know. It was a really hard thing to pull together. It was a ton of work, and it just feels so freaking good when it comes off, and like the audience is happy, and they're smiling, and they're singing along, and like, I don't know, it's like, it's kind of like, you know, when I was in high school, and we used to do like, you know, the little Broadway shows, and it's like you all pull together, and like, I don't know. And it's so weird when it's over, because it's like you feel like you had this family for a little while and you were just pulling together and you're all doing a thing. And I think, yeah, like you said, Kim, it's like a lot of us I don't get to have that experience very often. So like, now that I think about it, I guess like that is one of the things that I really love about being a musician. And it's very, very different from performing solo, which I've done a lot too. So
That makes a lot of sense. Jerry Ann, you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say something because my eyes are so opened up, or my body's opening up to things on an energetic level, being more aware energetically. And I am careful using that word. Everybody has kind of a way of what does it mean to them. But rather than interpreting either nature or what I see around me, starting to feel it, or trying to interpret it with other senses.
Yes.
And when we talk about being in groups of people where there's a mutual consensus to share the energy, or else focus with intention the energy into whatever the purpose is, like Kate's talking about with a performance, or there's a mutuality of intention of offering your energy into the whole.
Yes.
That's a really, really amazing feeling. But I also think of when I walk out my back door, and let's say it's just, I love to go out when it's really crazy windy, or I love blustery wind, or just the strength of nature. Sometimes I feel like feeling it, maybe I just need to feel it when it's that strong to energetically kind of catapult through me. It's almost like a cleansing, or it's like, but it's like you can feel, you can allow yourself to feel that, as well as feel the, feel a human energetically, or feel the horse energetically, and getting out of my head or preconceived notions or whatever, and being in my body, so that I'm in my body in a way that it's receptive to this other knowing. And when Kate's talking about being, like being in a fight, or when everything's aroused, you have like more awareness of certain things, because your your nervous system is really tuned on or turned on, right, to that. And that's then you can just like if you weren't in a fight, let's say you could be, if you were that highly sensitized and you were, walking down a trail or somewhere, you might be able to hear the bear, 2 miles away, or not 2 miles, but over this way or that way. You might, your senses might have been really heightened enough that you could really hear all this stuff. I think about the native indigenous people who had these superpowers that they walking around, and I'm like, wow, I don't know where I went with that, but I was just
a lot of good places.
yeah.
I'm just thinking energetically. And when I think that nature offers us something that is living and breathing when we walk out into it, whether it's a weed or my strawberry plant or the little squirrel running. But if I'm in a city, I'm sure that the building has an energetic footprint, but it's not breathing.
And a lot of the sounds are not natural sounds. And
natural to that environment, I guess. But I mean, I'm thinking about the differences in energy and quote nature based on the material, like even the material that you're next to. Like our horses are living, breathing organic matter, versus a concrete slab that you're sitting on, or
which is made up of living cells, but it's a very different
it's different density, it's different, it has a different footprint. And
Totally.
what does that footprint, or what does that, how does that affect us? Because we're talking about where if nature helps our sanity, what is that component that does help it?
I think there's lots.
Yeah,
think,
there's nothing one. Yeah.
but energetically is certainly a huge part of it. And the energy of, oh gosh, I think it ties back to this idea of interdependence and being together. And there's a movement of energy and a receiving and a putting out, and like it's active energy too.
Mhm.
That reminds me a lot of the when you watch horses in a herd, I mean, they're present with each other on so many levels. Like every little move they make, they know affects every other, right? And it's just natural to them to be in that state of presence. And it's very hard. And I remember when Marcus came and he was not used to doing that, how it was very hard for him to stay even that present, right? The natural world, to be in nature, really in it, living in it, does require us to be conscious, like of that bear, whatever, hearing that crackle and noticing it, right? And then seeing, does somebody else notice it, or give it, or saying silently, hey, did you hear that, right? Like, or just through our body language, and then we feed off of each other, and there's these ripples. And it feels very chaotic in the city to me, that there's less unity of purpose. There's so many purposes, and they're not necessarily interconnected. Everybody's doing their own thing, and then all the unnatural structures that are not really living in that way.
Well, and just to play devil's advocate, I wonder if you're someone who's never been exposed to what we're calling nature, the back porch or the green belt or whatever you can get out to. If you've never really had that, are you sensitized to I kind of lost what I was going to say. Do you even miss what you don't know? I don't know.
Probably not. And also like with Marcus, and like even I talked about having to kind of relearn how to be present in nature. I do think you lose it, and not necessarily that if someone plops you down in nature, you're going to feel safe there or good or relaxed, right? Because there is that. I think you're right. And that is a danger of us as a species becoming less and less acclimated or able to connect and feel connected in nature. But what is it that can, I guess my question would be, we get sensitized to that, we get to where we survive in that, but at what cost to health?
Yeah.
Right. That's the piece that I think I'm not seeing happen, that people are getting healthier. Really. I mean, in some ways, obviously there's easier access to food and right.
Yeah.
But
have you heard of forest bathing?
I've heard of it. I don't really know exactly what it is.
Yeah, I think in some countries, people get prescribed to go and have a forest bath where they have I'm trying to think where I saw the documentary on this forest that's designed for people to walk through, and it's got different places for them to take time and quietly sit. I think it's in Japan or somewhere where the cities are really crowded, but people can get out to these places, and they send them to go do that.
That's cool. I've heard something about doctors writing prescriptions to be in nature. I don't know if it's specifically forest baths, but this idea about writing a prescription to go do something in nature. It's a good question though, of like how much is just being there good enough, or what we're doing there, how we're approaching it. Those are good questions. I don't know. I mean, I think I would say any bit of it is helpful, but
I wonder, so I just saw, I have to go back and find it, I bookmarked it. I think it was in the Smithsonian magazine, and it was about co-regulation and energy. And I was just like, holy crap, they're finally talking about this, openly in the scientific community, which is fantastic, because now we don't have to, preface any discussion of like energy and, sharing energy and sharing wavelength as like, it's woo woo, but
Right.
I'm so tired of discounting things that I say. It's like we do that for each other. Horses do that for each other. Like if we're in good relationship with horses, like we do it for each other. And I think like it's one of the things about being in quote unquote nature that helps us is like, there's a rhythm and there is a communication among plants. And, it's like if you're quiet and you are open to it, you can like let yourself feel that and like be a part of that. And it's like when I was underwater, it's like I was receptive and open to just becoming a part of that quiet part of it. I'm like, I'm not a participant because I'm not here to touch anybody. I'm not here to mess with anybody. I'm just here to be here and like experience this rhythm. It's like if like sometimes there are waves underwater, and I mean you just see the fish just like they're not struggling, they're not doing anything, they're just like moving back and forth. And I'm like, all right, you're moving back and forth, I'm moving back and forth too. I'm not gonna fight this current. We're just here, man. So like I don't know, like maybe people who don't experience whatever, it's like if you live in Manhattan and you don't go to Central Park very often or whatever park is closest to you, maybe you get more of that from co-regulating from other people, or maybe you don't get it at all. I don't know. But I do think that there are multiple ways for us to like potentially, it's all community. It's all finding energy in a community of like plants or animals or other animals of our type, humans. It's just not all of us are super open to that because we don't trust anything, I think that's the part that drives people crazy. It's like when you can't trust energy from anything else or anyone else.
Yeah. And I think when I wrote this chapter, and nature is the source of sanity, I think what I really was thinking about is kind of where I've gotten in my life is when things just seem crazy or confusing, or I don't know what to believe or what the truth is. I've learned to be like, all right, let me look at nature, right? Let me get a reality check here. And nature's not all the same, but I'll be like, is there any example of this in nature? Or what would the animals think? Or what would the trees think? Or what would, right? And usually it's like very easy to go, oh, right. I don't know. I found that it often just gave me a really quick answer or a really quick mental shift away from the concern and worry and sort of spiral I might be going in to go, oh God, just yeah, I wasn't even, why am I worried about that? Right. Or that's just craziness. That's why it's stressing me out, because that's just purely crazy. Nothing in the natural world would ever do that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The natural world's pretty brutal though, too.
Yes.
I mean, it's super brutal. I could tell a chicken story about brutality, but I look at it and I go, excuse me, with, I can't manipulate sometimes what happens. It just happens. And you go, wow, that was a natural process. That was pretty brutal. Personally me, I'm going to just accept it because it is nature. It is pretty, and that to me, actually, sometimes that brings me sanity, Kim, when it's not all, puppies and kittens. It's sometimes it's just life is really harsh and things are harsh and nature is harsh. And when I look to it, it does give me strength to go, yeah, that sometimes there's just a process. There's a process going through. There's this death and regeneration, and it happens. It happens. I cannot control it. I cannot fight it. It's way too big. Way too big.
Yes.
It does offer me sanity. When you say nature, is sanity, I wasn't thinking of it so much in a soft way. I was thinking it sometimes offers me quite a bit of strength because of its brutality, I hate to say.
No, I think that's beautiful the way that you said it. And it also, more than anything, has helped me start to have a healthier relationship with death, right? And pain and suffering and all those things, right? Those are all part of life. And yeah, I mean, this is a great segue into what will be, there's dignity in death, which is next month's topic. And dignity has lots of different meanings, but death is something every one of us, everything that lives is going to experience. There's lots of different ways it happens. Some of it is peaceful, some of it is brutal, some of it involves a lot of suffering. But I also heard something recently that was oddly comforting to me, right? This is one of those weird things too. And it was that every body knows how to die. The process of death that the body goes through, like people wonder, like, I don't know how to do this. I don't, like, your body, everybody's body is born with the intelligence of how to shut itself down at the end of life. There is a process the body goes through, and you don't even have to know what it is. It just does it. And I don't know, that's kind of like, I don't know, morbid, right? It is morbid, but I found that really very comforting to be able to be like, whatever situation that will be for me at the end, I'm going to take comfort in that. Like, my body knows how to do this.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe that's not comforting to others, but I actually found that to be very, very comforting. And so what other kind of death happens in nature, it is part of the process, just like birth. Right? Yeah. A lot of animals, first time they give birth, they don't have any idea what's happening.
Yeah.
But it's
Can
like,
you
my body knows
imagine?
what to do.
God.
I'm just, my body and my instincts know what to do. So I'm just going to go with this. Right.
Where did that thing come from? Yeah.
I make that? Great.
Yeah.
As always, this has been a really great conversation and so much to think about. I'm going to be watching this one back again. You guys brought some really fascinating and very thoughtful points to this conversation. So I really
I
appreciate that.
feel like I'm looking at Anna and she has like a cloud above her head and I can see there's all this stuff in it, but I can't hear it.
Like she's thinking about a lot of things.
Yeah.
Weird.
I'm like, what are you thinking? I'm like, what are you thinking?
You have some final comments?
I'm sorry. I was like, Anna, say something. I'm like, are you there?
I am. I think my internet was a little unstable for a bit because we've got some storms coming and going, but
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I just find it all, yeah, it's fascinating. And I'm with Kim with the morbid bit, like definitely your body knows, and that's hard to think about, but it is what it is. And I think I feel like I deal with a lot of people who don't have that, they're so into the living the cush life, that we've developed, and then nature happens, because whether it's a car accident or whatever, or a fire, it's nature. I mean, that's
what we can't control. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And it's just, they're completely lost. And it's like, not, I don't want to be, obviously you're not going to rejoice in those situations, but it's like, you could, you have to make peace with it in a way, and it's really interesting because you'll have people that are just totally at a loss in a situation like that, and then you have the people that just get dialed in,
Yeah.
and it's so interesting. Like,
what's the difference there, right?
What is the difference? And I tell you, like, answering 911 calls, if I have somebody if I say 911, what's your emergency? And or what is the address of your emergency? And they give me the address, and then they start answering all my questions. I'm freaked out because you have an emergency, like something bad is going down.
And you want us to know how to find you.
Right.
Yeah.
But if I pick up the phone and somebody's screaming like a banshee, I'll just wait. Because this is probably not an emergency. You're probably just losing your mind.
Hmm.
And it's so interesting, like how when people know that they're in that situation of life or death, that they just, something happens.
You get clarity, right? That is true. And I haven't had a lot of life and death, but I have had a few situations where it's just like, it is emergency, and it is absolutely right. It's like, I want to give you my address so you can get somebody here as fast as possible. Like, that's all. Is all is like, someone needs to get here.
Right. And it's like, otherwise they're screaming, they're telling you 55 different things, and you're like, wait, why are you on the phone? Like, I don't know, I don't even understand that yet. So yeah, it's really interesting.
And that does seem like that goes to something in the again, that our body's just hardwired in an emergency to know how to focus in on what we need to focus in on. And if we're not
The
doing
research says it's true.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess there's research about how all those neuro pathways work. I mean, I can't remember. I read stuff and I get the whole bigger theory, but I don't always know all the finer details to repeat it. But I find it fascinating physiologically how we're built for some of that, and how which parts of our brains are actually lighting up under those circumstances. I mean, it's not, nobody's perfect, right? Nobody's a perfect organic specimen, but 99% of the time, that's how we were created to work. It's fascinating.
But you know what, that whole thing just made me think about, like, one of the few emergencies I drove up. This was several years ago. I drove up pretty late at night, and I was parked at where I was opening my gate to my driveway. And at that exact moment, my neighbor's garage, a fireball exploded, and their garage went up in flames. And I immediately called 911, right? And I remember that they asked me, what's your address, or where are you calling from? And I gave them my address because that's what I knew. And I remember thinking to my mind, well, that's my address, not theirs. But I was like, it doesn't matter. If they pull up here, they're going to see the fire, right? Like,
Right.
I knew that wasn't even an important detail to tell them. And then I said, my neighbors, but whatever. I remember my brain going, don't have time to tell them, it's next door, not here, right? That's so interesting.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's fun. I mean, I can remember like some of the calmest people that I've ever talked to had the worst. I had a guy whose house burned down. He was in there with his, like, it was a child, son or daughter. They were home alone, and he's like, what's the address of your emergency? Blah, blah, blah. Tell me exactly what happened. My house is on fire.
Right.
Okay. Are you in it? No, I'm outside with my, little child, whatever, and is anybody else in there? And just told, and he's just like, oh shucks.
And you don't know, like, if his child had been in the house, he might not have been quite as calm, but he probably still would have given the information, like, right away.
Right. And a lady whose husband shot her son. Didn't kill him, but shot him. Would tell me exactly what happened. Oh, my husband shot my son. Wait, you said what? Like, and it's just so crazy how, or, people that either witness or come up on really bad automobile accidents, and they're just like, oh yeah, the car flipped over 25 times and people got thrown out, and oh yeah, you're like, okay.
Wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so interesting, like how, and I do think that is our nature. Like, I think, our bodies are designed to do
what needs to be done.
Right. And go up and come down, and, not constantly, but have those moments and then come back. And then, where we stay right now in this sort of society of heightened alertness,
Well, I
as
think it's a
health.
level of stress that doesn't take us quite high enough where when you,
Right.
again, when you get to that high level, like all that other stuff isn't important.
No,
right?
right.
We're staying at that place where like everything feels really important and
Right.
that we can't handle, right? But if we can
Right.
go, oh, this is what's important, I'm focusing here, and the rest of that stuff I don't need to worry about. And
Mhm.
that does seem to be that's very interesting, something that we're not able quite at that survival level of stress to be able
Well,
to,
and chronic versus intermittent,
yeah,
you know, the threshold is different. Like with chronic stuff, that is on our health is really, really hard on us.
it is.
Chronic, unresolved, you know, heightened, whatever. That's the hard part.
A lot of times in nature, I don't like to say this is always, but a lot of times in nature, when you get animals that are in that state, it is when they're isolated or they don't have access to their community and they feel right, where everything seems like it's on me, or they can't feel safe. And that's I think another common thing we get in human society is just we don't have that level of community that we feel safe in, and so there's chronic stress.
And they can't regulate themselves, you know, like horses that are, you know, stalled mostly, you know, they don't have the opportunity for that movement. And I think like the same is true. I remember, oh my gosh, and I cannot remember, and I've read several articles about it, but I think there was a whole book somebody wrote about how like the current way of schooling and allowing boys to play, and how that's, you know, so restricted now. And, you know, we can't let them, you know, act out violence, like that, you know, they can't have guns, they can't, you know, they can't play army, they can't do all these things that boys have done forever. And like, is that part of this culture of, you know, angry men or, you know, active shooter scenarios, like because we're not, you know, we're not allowing them to, you know, they're not learning how to regulate. They're staying here and they're never, you know, because if they get up here, somebody's telling them get back down, you know, you
Right.
can't, you know. So yeah, like that's and that makes me think about the horses, like kind of the same thing, like, you know.
Yeah, never being able to, anyway, as we started out with Kate talking about her fight, you know, experiences, like our
Right. But
bodies,
that's like your natural behavior, right? That is nature.
and then it comes out in different ways eventually, ways that may
Right.
not be as healthy if we can't play with what's in our nature in safer ways. Yeah. A lot of food for thought here, guys.
Always good, Kim. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And hopefully some of you can be back next week again, or next month. I'm sorry, not next week. And then we'll be talking about
It's
death.
nice to meet you, Kate. And I
You
know
too.
Anna. Yeah.
Yes, it's great to see all you.
Yeah. Thank you. And have a
Thank you.
great month. And we'll be back in touch soon.
All right.
Okay,
Okay.
so
Bye.
bye.
Bye.